Okay.
Yeah. Wait, are you gonna take dumb screenshots of me this time?
No.
Where I'm making some face like.
Stay. Keep that.
No, I'm not.
Keep.
I'm not. Okay. So all right. What are we talking about? We're talking about use cases for operators, right?
Yeah. So we're starting this series, and it's a serious series. It's gonna. So we're doing. What are we doing? We're doing operators in RxJS, and basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through real-world examples and use cases, explanations of operators, and then differences between like this operator and that operator, and when should I use X instead of X?
Right.
Okay, so we started with switchMap. So switchMap values a value. Okay, the explanation of switchMap is switchMap maps the value to a new observable, and then it switches to it. So when you get a new value from a new observable, it subscribes to that observable and unsubscribes from anything else.
Yeah, so it only subscribes to one at a time, and when a new value comes in, and maps to that a new observable and unsubscribes from whatever it previously had, if it has anything.
And it only subscribes to one inner observable at a time, but will cancel any existing observable when a new observable arrives. What's an
So switchmap's a gotcha one because a lot of examples show switchmap with like HTTP GET, and so people think, oh, it's good for HTTP, and the problem is that if they're doing a post or a delete, where you're actually doing something where you're updating on the server, and then sometimes you update on the server and the value is coming back in the response, and you want to update your screen. If you use switchmap, you send the request, and then you can get in a situation where you send another request and it cancels the previous one. Well, that request still hits the server, still updates the server, but you never get the response back to update your screen. So your client gets out of sync with your server, and it causes weird bugs that are really hard to debug. So in those situations, you want to use concatMap, which is what we should probably talk about next. But switchmap is bad for any sort of AJAX except for GET, unless you're doing like HTTP post and you don't care about the response. If you don't care about the response, then switchmap's probably fine. But yeah, in most cases, people care about the response and the ordering.
So we talked a little bit about this, but you can explain it again on this video. So can you explain when you use switchmap? So this is like your real world use case example.
A real world use case would be situations where you're just performing a GET. You want the latest information, and you don't care about like the information as it comes back. So like switchmap is a decent one for like the look ahead, like the autocompletes where you're typing into a text box. And if, for example, someone says, oh, I typed into a text box, and then it sends a request and they realize they mistyped a letter, and they go back and you send another request, like you don't care about the request that had the wrong letter in it. You only care about the last one. So that's like the ideal use case for switchmap.
Well, here's a good one. When do you not use switchmap? And I know you kind of explained that. Yeah. Explain it in.
You don't use, and honestly, in most cases, you should probably be using a concatMap. You don't want to use switchmap if you're doing HTTP post or HTTP GET or those sorts of things. So these are the most common use cases of people doing HTTP requests with them. So if you're doing any sort of stateful update to the server, you do not want to use switchmap. SwitchMap, the other use case for SwitchMap is if you're toggling between two streams, or you're toggling one stream on and off. So let's say you've got a WebSocket and you want to turn it on and off. You might like link up button clicks to SwitchMap into the stream from the WebSocket or to empty, right? So you can toggle between, you can toggle it on and off. So that's another use case for SwitchMap. That's like maybe the second most common thing that people are doing with it. And obviously, like concatMap is not really going to work with that, because concatMap's waiting for a stream to end before it subscribes to the next one.
Okay, so then bringing us to, do you want to say anything else about SwitchMap before we move on to concatMap?
No, just the biggest thing is just people should use it cautiously with HTTP if they're not doing HTTP GET.
Okay, concatMap.
Hey, don't be on at me.
Let's start with explanation. This is
It
tired.
is early in the morning. Well, for me.
Well, it's like when I look at you, since you're so old, I just get tired. Like, you know how you get tired around sleep, like old people, like sleepier?
That's horrifying, Tracy.
Yeah. I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. Okay, concatMap. Explanation.
Just so you know, Lego David Hasselhoff does not approve of what you said. You know, I had that on my desk. I also have Lego Kit. It's really important. Anyway, so so Lego
concatMap.
Yes, concatMap. So concatMap is probably the most common one people should use with HTTP requests. And what it does is it only subscribes to one at a time, but it will map every single value it gets into an observable and queue them up and play them end to end to end. So it ensures that everything happens in the order that it arrived, basically.
That's important for like a lottery. Or like this one time when I was shopping, I was so mad, Ben. So I'm going to tell you, I was so pissed.
Good.
I was shopping for Dillard's semi-annual sale, which is every New Year's, okay? So they say at 11 p.m. Central Time, the sale starts, okay? So I'm like sitting there, have everything queued up in my shopping cart, have like 33 items to purchase, okay? 11 p.m. hits. All of a sudden, I cannot get into the website. And it says, don't refresh your screen because you'll lose your place in line. You're in a queue. And I'm like, you are a load of crap. You don't have my queue. So I kept refreshing and refreshing and refreshing. And then I opened incognito and I refreshed that. And I had like 3 computers open and my phone. And I was like, okay. And some I refreshed, some I didn't. But it was a lie, wasn't it? But then I inspected the element and like it seemed like it. Anyways, I was very sad. But this is kind of when you would want to really use concatMap. Like you don't want to use switchMap because you care about the order that person is coming in. Also, were they lying to me, Ben?
I don't know. It seems weird that, yeah, I don't know.
So anyways, use concatMap in these situations. Ben, you are not feeling my sad story.
No, this is important. I mean, shopping at Dillard's is like a thing, so.
You would look so cute in Dillard's clothes.
It's good to know. I'll look into it. So concatMap, that sounds.
Plays it end to end, only subscribes one at a time. You care when it when you care about the
Right. So real world example, it's just to say you have a list of items on a screen. Mm-hmm. And you have a delete button next to them. So every single time you delete one, it sends a delete HTTP request to the server, and then the server responds with the updated list. If you were to go through and say delete, you would want to make sure that every single one of those things was being sent one after the other, and that the updated list was updating one after the other. Because if you say used mergeMap, for example, mergeMap does not keep order. So if one of those, let's say the third one after, like if you do 5 in a row and the third one for some reason takes much longer than all the other ones, then the data that's going to be displayed on your screen will be the data from the third request and not from the very last one, because it doesn't honor order at all. Where concatMap will force the order by only doing them one at a time, one after the other. So it builds up a buffer of what it's going to do, and then it, flushes them one at a time.
So what are the differences? You just talked about like difference. We're talking about like differences between this operator and that operator. So a lot of people always ask like, when should I use X instead of X? So can you talk through some of those examples?
So if you're doing HTTP, the safe bet is concatMap. The only time you might want to do switchMap is if you're only getting data, you're not posting data. So
But
in
why bother
HTTP, you never want to use mergeMap ever because it doesn't honor order. And if you send 7 requests, so like the first one could come in last. So.
But I mean, you're basically telling me that switchMap doesn't even matter. I mean, I guess switchMap.
No, switchMap totally matters. Like there's really valid use cases for toggling streams on and off, or toggling between 2 or 3 different streams. Like those are use cases for switchMap that like no other operator can really do.
Okay. So toggling, really.
Yeah. And like it's interesting. SwitchMap becomes more interesting when you actually start dealing with like real streams of data. So like HTTP requests are a stream of 1, right? Like you get 1 piece of data back. But if you're dealing with, you know, say like mouse movements or animations or you know, WebSocket stuff or anything like that, which is kind of more exciting stuff. It's just people don't get to deal with it as much. SwitchMap is much more useful than concatMap in a lot of cases.
Dude, you didn't even talk about the switchMap animation situation or anything like that.
Well, that's like a lot of, basically you can wrap an animation in an observable, right? So if you wanted to start something animating and then stop it, you might use switchMap. And like the switchMap, like you could even say like, oh, whenever this observable tears down, animate it back to wherever it was supposed to go or something like that. So switchMap would cause it to come back. Like there's animation's a whole different animal because you can compose so many things and it could mean anything. Like you're just moving things around. So.
Mm-hmm. So concatMap. So when do you not use concatMap?
Let's see.
Besides what you are
use concatMap. So you would not use concatMap. You can't use catmap to toggle streams on and off. You do not want to use concatMap with endless streams because all of the concat functionality in Rx relies on the stream completing. If the stream never completes, then every subsequent concatMap is just going to build up that buffer, and the other observables that it's buffering up are never going to run. It's just going to run the first one it hits, and it's going to wait for it to get done before it's going to try to do the next one, and it never gets done. So you're stuck.
So that's like pretty big that you always want to make sure that you have. You always want to make sure that you're using. That you have like an observable that completes.
Right. Like, so like user events, right? Like you would never use concatMap with user events. Like if you were like mouse moves, concatMap into this thing, like there's no, or like concatMap or like button click, concatMap mouse moves. Like you click the button, you'd start doing mouse movements. And the next time you click the button, you would never get the next set of mouse movements. It just would never ever go until it ends. So every single time you do concatMap, you have to make sure the observable you're mapping to ends in some way. Like you have a take until or something like that.
Okay, let's get into mergeMap next. So explanation of mergeMap. It's
probably the simplest overall conceptually. All it does is take every single value, map it into an observable, and subscribe to it and like pump in the output.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like just output whatever is coming from this inner observable. So it's like it's just kind of naively just taking every single value, mapping it into an observable, and merging that observable's output into one observable. So you don't want to use that for HTTP basically ever because you don't know when a server is going to respond.
Mm-hmm.
So if one request is slow and the other one's not, then they could come back out of order. If you don't care about order, then you could use it, but that's mergeMap.
These are like really good, simple, like, you know, as we're going through this, it's like anybody, once they kind of understand these small little nuances, like let's say for HTTP, can kind of like go in to any code base and be like, oh, well, you're using this for this. Like it seems like really easy refactoring once you understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Just makes me happy. Okay, real world examples and use cases.
Let's see, real world examples for mergeMap. Really for mergeMap, you might use it with something like animations or starting multiple streams. Trying to think. So if you were to have like an observable of like animations where you're just getting a bunch of coordinates to update multiple sprites in a screen or something like that, you might use a mergeMap. You might use mergeMap for, I don't know, the use case. Honestly, the use cases for mergeMap are much more limited than the other ones, even though it's probably one of the most common ones that people go to as far as like real world applications with like HTTP requests and those sorts of things, because you never want to use it with an HTTP request for the most part.
Except for what? What's the edge case?
The edge case is when you don't care about what order things come back. So let's just say that you were like, oh, well, I want to have these deletes fire, and I don't really care whether or not, like, I'm not getting any data back from the server to update my view. I'm just deleting things. Then you could like mergeMap and just delete. And every single time someone hits the button, it's going to delete as fast as possible, as opposed to concatMap, which is going to go delete, it's done, delete, it's done, delete, it's done, right? Like, so mergeMap's going to fire them all as fast as it gets them, and concatMap's only going to do one at a time.
But okay, but like you're basically saying, when you say like, hey, I don't care about the order, then I think like, okay, well, why not use, in that situation, why not use switchMap? Why use mergeMap? Why aren't you using
because you might want to know what errors come back from those requests, right? So if with switchMap, you're like, oh, if you say delete, you sent all those requests off to the server, but if any of them come back with like a 500 error or something like that, you won't know because you've already canceled, right? Everyone but the last one. Where with merge, you can say delete, and like if one of them has an error, you're gonna get an error back, and you can handle it.
So you always have to, like, with switchMap, it automatically unsubscribes, but like with mergeMap, then how would you unsubscribe from all the things that are coming into that?
So that you have one output observable, and if you unsubscribe from that subscription, it'll tear down all of the inner ones that are inside.
Yeah, but with switchMap, you have to unsubscribe too.
Yeah, so like switchMap and concatMap don't have like an inherent unsubscribe behavior I'm sorry, concatMap and mergeMap do not have an inherent unsubscribe behavior like switchMap does.
Oh, because with your output, when you're doing an output and you're unsubscribing from that output on switchMap, you're just unsubscribing from one.
Yeah.
Like with switchMap and concatMap, or sorry, mergeMap and concatMap, you might be unsubscribing from like 20 or something like that.
Yeah. If you unsubscribe from the results observable from any of them, it's going to unsubscribe every internal observable, right? Like mergeMap is the only one that subscribes to multiple at the same time. concatMap does one at a time. SwitchMap does one at a time. ExhaustMap does one at a time. SwitchMap is the only one that has an inherent unsubscribe behavior on the inside for the, I only want this one, no, forget it. Now I only want this one, no, forget it, etc.
Wait, hold on. That was actually pretty important. Like, don't you think it's important for people to understand like how many each subscribe to at a time?
Yeah, I think so. Like basically all of them except for mergeMap only subscribe to one at a time. And like all of them except for SwitchMap don't have an inherent unsubscribe behavior on the inside.
Wait,
so how do I differences like that? But mergeMap, the use case, I'm sorry, just go back to the use case for mergeMap is when you're sending, if you want to send a bunch of requests as fast as possible, and you care about whether or not they might error, but you don't really care about the responses coming back, like the order in which they come back, then mergeMap is great. But I would say the most common out of all three that we've discussed today, the most common one people should be using is concatMap for the most part.
Hold on. Put this into a sentence for me. So we want to, you know, as we're sort of like sorting this out, the question is how many observables does each operator subscribe to at any given time?
Yeah, all of them, every one of them except for mergeMap only subscribes to one at a time.
But not every one of them, just the three that we're talking about.
Yeah, well, we can also include exhaustMap. I mean, that's another one we haven't talked about, and it's kind of useful. But yeah, that's the only other one that kind of falls in there, and only does one at a time.
Okay, wait, hold on. So why don't you go to the explanation of exhaustMap?
Okay, so exhaustMap is kind of the opposite of switchMap. So switchMap, it's saying every time a new value arrives, unsubscribe from what I have and subscribe to the new one I made. And exhaustMap says every time a value arrives, if I'm not already subscribed to something, like map it into an observable and subscribe to that, and then wait for that one to complete before I allow any more values to be mapped into a new observable. So it waits till it maps into an observable and it waits for that to be exhausted before it allows any more values to come in. So use case examples for this would be like things like touch drag. You would use exhaustMap because you're saying, you'll be like, oh, for every touch, I want to take all of the mouse moves and I want to use exhaustMap, or for all of the touch moves, I want to use exhaustMap for this until touch up. And the reason you use exhaustMap is there's a situation where you could touch and then touch again with the second finger and start dragging, and you wouldn't want the second touch to cancel your mouse movements, which is what would happen if you use switchMap, right? And mergeMap doesn't make any sense because then you have two things going on. So you want to just have, you want to say, oh, I want to wait until there's a touch up and then unsubscribe from the touch movements. So that's a use case. Another one might be like if you have a button to submit like a payment and you don't want people double submitting, right? Obviously, UX wise, you should just disable the button, but like you can use RxJS to say, well, send this request, but send it with exhaustMap. And what that means is every other time someone pushes the button, it won't do anything until that last request comes back successfully, right? So you can't possibly double submit in that case. So that's another use case for exhaustMap. But yeah, so it's useful and different than the other ones.
What's the difference between like, so when should I use X instead of X? When should I use exhaustMap instead of whatever?
All right, so you should use exhaustMap in situations where you only want one request or one stream in flight, and you do not you don't want any duplicates. So you don't want any duplicate effort. You don't care about the latest one. You just care about sending one off and having it be successful. So that's the exhaustMap use case.
When do I not use this operator?
When do you not use exhaustMap?
Where have you seen like bad cases of exhaustMap?
I haven't seen too many bad cases of it because I don't think enough people know about it to use it, or know what it does. But you wouldn't want to use exhaustMap for like deletes in a list or something like that, right? Because you'd be like delete, and then if that one didn't come back and you're like delete, you'd be like delete. I'm doing nothing. This does nothing. Okay, delete. Like it just doesn't make any sense. So like I don't think many people are going to make the mistake of using exhaustMap in the wrong spot because most people don't use it for things. Yeah.
How about how many observables does exhaustMap subscribe to at any given time?
Just one.
Okay. So okay, mergeMap, merge, and map. Let's talk about merge. So like a lot of times people like will use merge. I mean, I've seen it, maybe I'm crazy, but like a lot of times people use mergeMap when they should have just used merge. Yes or no?
Yeah, I mean, merge the operator is deprecated, but there's like a static merge method, and all it really does is it's a cousin to mergeMap. Basically, it says, hey, you say merge, and then you give it a bunch of observables, and basically it says subscribe to all of these observables and take all their outputs and merge them into one observable. That's what merge does.
So are we? I mean, we're not telling people not to use merge, right?
No, not at all. Merge has a lot of use cases. Merge is just saying, oh, I want to subscribe to a whole bunch of observables at once, but I want to do them in one subscribe call. So that's one of the big use cases of merge.
And then can you explain what it is?
What merge is?
Yeah.
Kind of just explain what merge is, but
Okay.
I can't. I mean, I would just be kind of reiterating what I already said. Like you take a bunch of observables and you subscribe them all, and have all their values pumped into one observable.
Is that all it does?
Yeah, that's it. That's all it does. So merge, and in fact, a lot of times when people use merge, they don't even care about the values that are coming out of merge. What they really cared about is they wanted to subscribe to a bunch of observables at the same time, because observables can have side effects. They don't necessarily, it's not always about the values you get out of them. So,
so that's like, so then doing that is really the only real world example and use case of merge, right?
Yeah, that's the main use case of merge. It's just kind of like a primitive for kind of combining and joining observables together.
So like, when should I not use merge? Or when
that's hard to say. Like other than like, don't use merge when it doesn't make sense to use merge. Like if you don't want to merge two observables together, then don't use merge. Like,
okay. And then what about map?
Map is the common use case is just transforming data. So map is probably the most common operator in people's apps, because you're just saying, oh, the stream of data I've got isn't quite the right shape, and I want to change it to some other shape that I care about. That's map. That's what you use map for. The place, all right, so the place I see people screw up, and I've seen this many times, is they'll get like an observable of arrays of data. It's very common. You'll go and you'll HTTP request, and you get back this array of data, and people will take that and they'll try to take the array of data and split it up with Rx, and then map each data piece with Rx, and then like join it back together or something and send it out. And in reality, in most cases, what you wanted to do is just use map, and inside of the map, like use array map or array filter or whatever you need to do, and just use the array operations on your array of data and then send it back out, like, because it's way more efficient to do that. But that's the only place I've seen people screw up with map, is thinking they needed to use RxMap to map arrays, and that's just not true. JavaScript has that built in.
What are some other themes? So do we go through all the maps? ExhaustMap, mergeMap, concatMap, switchMap. What map are we forgetting?
There's like expand, but that's not really a map.
But that's a theme. Should we go through expand, do you think, is the next one we should go through?
Yeah, we can talk about expand. Expand is it's basically merge map, only it's recursive. So what that means is you take a value, you map it into an observable and subscribe to it. And it emits all the values from that observable, but also it takes all those values as they arrive and it pumps it back into the same mapping function. So basically you get this this kind of recursive behavior where if you say observable of 1, and then you expand that into observable of 1, 2, what it's going to do is it's going to come through with 1, map that into 1, 2, and then both emit 1 and 2, and then into that function 1 and 2 both come in again. And those double again. So every single step, it's going to double and keep going and keep going. You'll get a Stack Overflow if you do that. But that's the idea. It's recursive. So the use case for expand would be well, it's like Falcor Router at Netflix used expand to basically crawl async graphs. So if you have this async tree of data that you have to request, then you might do that. So you request some data and you get like a node of the tree, and it says, oh, there's these other nodes over here. And so you take those nodes and you send them back into expand, and it goes and requests those nodes, and those nodes say, oh, I've got these other nodes and they're over here. And so you take those and you request them again, and eventually you get to the end of the tree. So crawling trees, crawling async trees in particular is a big use case for expand. People will write like a mile of code to get that done, when expand will do most of that usually in one line.
So is there ever like I should use expand instead of, like, do people?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So like people sometimes will write code that they'll have like a subject that goes into like a merge map, and then the merge map, when it's done, pumps back into the subject. So they have this like cycle going on in there. And if that's the case, they probably could just use expand. So there's been multiple times where I've seen code like that and refactored it into one expand call.
But like, when do they do that usually? Like,
again, it's usually in situations where like they'll say they request some data, and they analyze the data and realize they need to request more data, and they analyze that data, and then they realize they need to request more data. So they're basically doing something where they're crawling asynchronous data, or like fetching, like say you're fetching paginated results. That's a good example where you're like, give me this page, and that gives you a link to get the next page, and then give me the next page, and then it gives you a link to get the next page. Give me the next page, and so on. And what people commonly do is they'll have a subject and they'll say, next, I want 1. And then they'll merge map that into going and getting the data. And when that comes back, they'll analyze it and tell it and say, hey, subject, next, I want 2. And then it'll just kind of keep doing that. And you could do that with expand. And expand will do that in one line. It makes it shorter.
When do you not use it?
Most of the time.
Okay.
Most of the time you don't use it. It's mostly only useful when you are doing, like you're getting, usually it's just when you're getting a stream of one piece of data or a few pieces of data, and you need to analyze them in some way and send out and create more streams from what you got back. So it's not a common use case.
So like,
data is
like not know. Do a lot of people just like not know expand?
They don't know it, and or they don't have a use for it. I think a lot of people don't know it because frequently I'll see code that people are using like a subject in merge map and then back into the subject instead of using expand.
Well, I'm just going through our list. So how many observables does this one does expand subscribe to at any given time?
How much observables could an observable? If an observable could observable an observable?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What's your question?
How many observables does expand subscribe to at any given time?
And any number. But that can subscribe to as many observables as what go through it.
What other?
You just hold up a mustache.
No, I was smelling my lotion.
You look like you're holding up a mustache.
It's Zara lotion. Bergamot. It smells really good. Can you grow a mustache for me?
I'm gonna smell David Hasselhoff.
You know what I've been doing lately is Elliot won't yes. Elliot won't put beard oil in his beard because he's too lazy. And he also won't put, he's gonna kill me because this is on the internet, but we just won't tell him. You can tell him, that'd be funny. But like, so he won't put beard oil on, and then he also won't lotion his elbows. And it drives me nuts because I have to touch his elbow sometimes. Like sometimes I'll just get a scrape of elbow. So every morning and night, I like take oil and just shove it on him. and
you like ambush him with oil?
I'm like, give me your elbows. And I like lotion his elbows, and then I put stuff on his face. It's really fun. We're just big children. You're amused.
I am amused. Although now I'm worried I need to lotion my elbows.
Yeah, dude. Maybe like, if you ever see Jesse like avoiding you, you'll be like, do I have crappy elbows? You got to get some lotion on those elbows. Do you have lotion? Good job.
Oh, yeah. See.
Good job. Good job.
Oh.
All right. Okay, what's another one we should do that's kind of like in the theme of what we've been talking about? Good job.
Oh, I'm lifting my elbows. This is important.
You got proper elbow moisture.
Sweet. It feels kind of weird. I don't know if I've ever lotioned my elbows now that I think about it.
Yes.
I'm not going to get addicted to this, am I?
Lotioning your elbows, you might be like, wow, I really feel like lotioning my elbows today.
They bend so much better.
You've gotten smaller.
I know, right? I'm so tiny.
No, I'm serious. Maybe it's the camera angle.
I'll get closer. Is that better?
That's better. That's better. Okay, so what other operators can we talk about that's like in the theme?
That's really all of them that in of that kind of vein of doing things.
What's the next theme we should go to? Should we go to the easy ones, or should we do things like you're talking about catch error, or
yeah, we should probably talk about error handling next, or either error handling or unsubscription.
well, error handling observables, or just error handling in general?
Observables specifically.
Error handling. No, error handling. Is there a class of error handling observables?
Yeah, of operators. Yeah, there's like.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, there's retry when, catch error.
Okay, retry when, and catch error. Which other ones?
On error, resume next.
I've never heard of that one.
Look on your face is like, what is that?
On error, resume next. Okay. Start with retry.
Oh, we're still going. I figured we were cutting off at 8 o'clock.
Oh, I'm so sad.
We don't get to do round 2 of this. You're just going to do them all in one day?
If you leave me now. You think we should go for another 20 minutes? Are you free?
No, I'm not actually.
All right. We'll end. But I'm super stoked on error handling operators for our next adventure. Okay, say bye to the internet, but then stay on so we can say bye-bye.
Bye, internet.
Bye.